Hi there and welcome to DevSecTalks. I'm your host, Ashley Ward, and today I'll be joined by Andre. Andre is the Senior Application Security Engineer at Zopa, the world's first peer-to-peer lending company designed to connect potential investors with individuals seeking loans. Andre will break down the importance of understanding security processes, even for those who aren't in security roles. We'll also get into a few tips on how you can defend yourself and your organization from cybersecurity vulnerabilities. Let's get right to it. Hi, Andre. Thanks for joining me. You're joining me from Zopa. Tell me a little bit about Zopa.
Hi, Ashley. Thank you for having me. So Zopa was launched in 2005 as a peer-to-peer lending company that would connect investors with individuals seeking loans. An investor money would be split in small chunks that would be then lent to multiple users seeking loans. So you as an individual, your loan would be composed by small chunks from multiple investors. And last year, in 2020, we received a full banking license, meaning that we can now offer more products like the fixed term savings that are backed by the FCS protection and credit cards.
People should certainly check out Zopa's website because it's if you're looking for a loan or if you're looking to invest, it's a really good place to go. So your role with Zopa, what is it that you do there?
So I'm a senior security engineer at Zopa. So I do a bit of everything related to application security. I work really closely with our developer teams and also with our SRE and DevOps team as well. My role consists on security of our applications, implementing security checks in our software development lifecycle pipelines. On these secure software development lifecycles, we have some checks, like for example, when developers start to create an application, we have a meeting with them. With a security questionnaire, so we are actually embedded in the initial steps of the application conception. And this security questionnaire will be, for example, what type of data the application will handle, will it be public or not, what type of authentication, just for us to have a bit of try to assess the risk of that application. And based on that, we'll also do a threat modeling to identify the risks with potential solutions to that risks. And then the developers can start to code their application, and when the application is in a more mature phase, we do a pen test on it. And if nothing comes out from that pen test, everything is okay. The application can then proceed to the multiple environments of production or your UAT, for example. And then there is a continuous monitoring of that production applications. We also are responsible for developing some internal applications that help automate these processes and reporting. A bit of cloud security. Zopa is mostly uses AWS, so we enforce some misconfigurations, IAM policies, IAM roles. We help to secure workloads like EC2 instance, S3 buckets, and EKS, like most of our applications in containerized, we use Kubernetes and AWS EKS. And so we do continuous monitoring and alerting and container scanning as well.
How do you get involved in that in the SDLC? How do you get involved so far in that pipeline? What are the steps for getting there?
So, for example, the steps, if you need to first define a goal. So, for example, if the goal is, reduce vulnerabilities, let's say, try to shift left the vulnerabilities. We first need to, one thing that helped us with this project at Zopa a few years ago, that actually was to reduce the vulnerabilities, the critical vulnerabilities in production. And how we did it was, first, we need to create an inventory of your applications and the owners of these applications. This will be essential to make things work, and it should be your first step. Then you should create and define vulnerability thresholds, like what will your pipeline block? Will it block on critical vulnerabilities or high vulnerabilities? After defining these thresholds, you should specify the SLAs for each of them. This will detect how fast and priority is each threshold. And then we need to address these vulnerabilities in production, because these vulnerabilities we are essentially talking about dependency vulnerabilities and third-party vulnerabilities. As you know, vulnerabilities are released every day. And one thing is blocking the pipeline on application with non-critical vulnerabilities. This is easy. You just need to run a vulnerability scan in the pipelines. And this will be our CI context. And another thing is actually after the application is deployed to production and a new vulnerability is released, what we do now? We can't block the pipeline because the application is already in production. So what do we do? And this will be the continuous monitoring and alerting part that I mentioned. And that's why the application owners and the defined SLAs will be essential to make this work. After we have all of these defined, which should define and try to understand how will it deal with the vulnerable dependencies that we cannot fix. And these will be, for example, because of a package with a breaking change, for example, or because the third party image that you don't control the dependencies, or simply the fix will require a lot of work and will require re-architecting of the application. So this will be our exceptions process, and should define how we will implement this exceptions process. And I forget what I was saying.
No, that was great, because so it was the whole idea of saying, I speak to people all the time who say, oh, well, what we'll do is we'll give people in development the tools to be able to scan something. And as you said, that's kind of the easy bit, just getting that scan. But I'll speak to people in security who'll say, well, and then what we'll do is we'll keep telling them to scan it until it goes green. And once it's green, we know it's good, and that's that problem solved. And, but that's not how to go about it, as you've just said there. Really, really good. Because you've said, yes, that's one part, give people those tools to be able to do it, but then not on a case-by-case basis, but what's your process for dealing with this? So that application owner, I'm going to ask you in a minute about how you go about, if it's tags or whatever you're using there, but identifying that application owner, then having a process to have the CI part, and then what happens in production, and then what happens to those exceptions? And what's the exception process? So that appreciation that there will be things that go in and end up with a critical or a vulnerability that comes out and is already running. There will also be things where, well, maybe there's no fix available. So how do we want to deal with that? And you've said that there's different environments and how, because you might have different levels of risk in each one. And so how that gets done. That's really, really cool. I think anybody listening will find that really useful, because it's a real world case, right? So application owner, how's that identified? Is that tags on things? Talk me through that.
As I mentioned, everything is operated at Zopa. So how do we identify the owners? Basically, we are using the Docker labels. So the maintainer label, and this maintainer label can be an email team, for example, or it can be a Slack channel. And how did you enforce this? So basically, we define this requirement that all applications need to have a maintainer or an owner. And then we create a CI check that blocks the application to be deployed if this application does not have this maintainer label. And this will be crucial, because if we know the owner of that application, we can create an automation around it to actually alert that team, alert the owner through email or to Slack, that their application is now vulnerable to this certain CVE, so they can start to work on a fix. Because essentially, it's a team responsibility to fix this vulnerability. Us as a security team, we are responsible to advise and to alert and to implement security solutions. But they are the owners of the application, so they are the ones that know how their application works. So they are the ones that should be fixing this application.
Okay, that's excellent. Now that information around, okay, there's team A over there and team B, is that just privately sent to them? Is that just something for that only each team sees their own thing, or is it? How's that work?
What we ended up doing it was we created this application that basically automates all of this. So application is running in production, let's say, and a new vulnerability is released. Immediately, this application that you build is basically a webhook that receives this information. Okay, a new critical vulnerability for image A. We will pull the information of this image, and we'll get the environment where it's running, the owner of that image, and the information about that vulnerability. After it gets this information, it will send an alert, can be email alert or a Slack channel, if it can define which one they want. It says a new vulnerability was found on your application running on these environments, on these namespace as well. You get the namespace information. And you now have, let's say, we have a 30 days grace period until when the application will be locked. Because if a new vulnerability is released, normally the patch is only released after a few days. So we get nothing from blocking an application from day one, because there is no patch available. How can the developer even work on the potential fix? So we send all of these information, and the developers know that after that vulnerability is released, they have 30 days until they have 30 days to fix the vulnerability, or the application will start to be blocked. And then there is the exceptions process behind it. Like I mentioned, they maybe will not be able to even to fix a vulnerability, or because like it's a breaking change, for example. So we have this like exceptions process behind it. We created like this policy as codes, like basically it's a GitHub repository with all of the policies that will be JSON files. And these JSON files specified that the teams can specify the CV that they want to whitelist, and the image that they want to whitelist, and the expiration dates. The expiration date is important because we allow only a maximum of 3 months that vulnerability can be exception. It can be an exception, and after these 3 months, or they have basically 3 months to fix the vulnerability, or they need to have another exception for it, and this needs to be reviewed. Why, if they have a really good reason why they need another exception. Also, all of this is automated, so the developers create a PR against this Git repo. Someone from my team will review and approve that PR, and then a pipeline will kick in that will actually apply these policies. And then, like I mentioned, continuous monitoring, continuous alerting is very important. So we actually also alert when an exception is coming to a due date, because if they create an exception, let's say for 2 months, and 2 months they didn't need to worry about the exception, and then if they are not aware that exception will expire from one day to another, their application will again be blocked, and they will not even remember that they created an exception for it. So we have the same application that runs through all of the policy, all of the exception policies, and will send an alert saying, okay, your exception will expire in 14 days. So you need to actually work on it, because with 14 days, their application will be blocked. So we send this alert from vulnerabilities to exceptions privately to each team, or to their email, or to their Slack channel. It's a bit way to try to reduce the noise, because if you have like a channel where all developers are, and we start to send all vulnerabilities there, like it will be like a lot of noise, because we'll essentially be alerting on applications that you're not even the owner, so we don't even care about it. So that's why we target specific teams and specific channels to try to reduce the noise.
Yeah, that would be a channel that I would mute pretty fast if it was there. But that's really important. So it shows that the ownership does make it, and you've put in, that's your first check, and that's your first block, is saying no, it needs to have that information that's there, and then being able to feed that back. So I won't make you answer it. I'm going to assume that that's the voice of experience there, that because people ignore it for 2 months and then suddenly it's blocking again. Oh no! So that's really good. So people listen. I think this is really useful, because I think people listening will be able to, or people watching will be able to think, okay, that's a great lesson learned. Yes, you can have that exception. To manage those exceptions, they need to be policy as code. It needs to be like that, and that's where you're then not the one who's being forced to necessarily write all of this or administer it all. You're actually doing it through pull requests, the same way that we do with so many other things. And
it's not even an InfoSec member to create these exceptions. Actually, are the developers, because they know which exception with vulnerabilities have been blocked, with CVs have been blocked, and they know it's a simple JSON file. They don't only need to specify image, CVE, namespace, or environment, and the exception date of that. It's really easy to create the policy.
Now that's really good. So you've got them creating that, and then pull requests that you can review, and that will kick off that policy. How do you go about making security, if you're telling one team you've got a vulnerability and having that loop, as we just discussed, how do you bubble that up for the whole company to see that security is in general getting better?
Easy. One thing I like to create is create metrics and dashboards. It really helps a long way. Why? Because if you create a dashboard with all of the vulnerabilities or metrics and vulnerabilities you have on a cluster, you can see how healthy the cluster is. So for example, let's say we have 200 containers releasing in production, and we have 400 vulnerabilities, for example, and which actually how many vulnerabilities each container has. And you can actually have a graph through the time and see all the vulnerability evolve. So you can actually see, okay, these policies actually improving the security posture, because you can see the vulnerabilities through time is actually decreasing. Another thing I like to do is a bit of gamification with developers. How we do that is we create graphs with vulnerabilities per tribe or per team, for example, and you can see how is the team going through time with their vulnerabilities. And I bet you they don't want to be the team that has the most vulnerabilities. So they will actually work on it to try to be the team with the less or none vulnerabilities. So this gamification process, we put almost compete each team against each other, to see the team that has the least vulnerability in production. So creating metrics and graphs goes a long way, because it's something visible, like put this dashboard in your TV screens around, or monitors around the company, and you can see like how healthy and the process going and increasing it.
Well, that's really good, because you've pointed out something. Sometimes it's easy. People will say, "Oh, create a dashboard," and that's that. I've seen countless dashboards in my working career where you go, "That's a waste of a TV. Why on earth are we showing that?" But that's really good the way you've put it, because you're breaking it down into who owns things. Whether it's somebody who owns the cluster, your cluster's not looking that great, or the other way, which is those teams, and saying, "Well, we're not telling you that team's bad. We're just showing you that team isn't at the top," or whichever way around. So it's really good. It's gamification of it. And so from a technology standpoint, you've talked about Kubernetes. You've talked about the containers that are there. What's your rationale for the containerized choice? I mean, maybe it's not the wrong thing, but what are your thoughts around the containerized choice? Is that so you've got an exit strategy to move cloud providers, or what's the best thing about containers for you?
The best about containers is like the isolation that they provide. So it's really easy. For example, we have a vulnerable application, so it's really easy to just create a new patch that vulnerable dependency, create a new image and deploy it. And in case of a breach, for example, it's a particular container, so it's not application as a whole. So you can always kill the container and scale the container up or scale the container down. If there is any persistence on the container, it will essentially be killed when the container is killed. So it's all this like flexibility and moving fast and agile development that the container provides.
That's a great answer, and it's actually got more detail in it than I was expecting, since I just threw that at you out of the blue. Because a lot of times people will just go for reasons and this, but actually no, that's the one about the speed. So sometimes people would say about the portability, but that's the speed. That's being able to put something out there and regress it or remediate as you need to as things go. Now that's really, really good. I think that's a fantastic around that. Is there any other parts of that you think, in case I've missed any, around your software development lifecycle, that if there's somebody's listening to this saying, "I want to do this in my organization," is there anything about what we've talked about that you think you want to highlight, or that I've maybe missed in asking you? What would somebody do to do this?
When you are in the process of designing these policies and requirements, do not put them in blocking mode from the first time, from day one. Like, let it run for a few weeks, few months, you decide it, put it in alerting mode, because people will not be happy if from one day to another you start to block things without even telling them. So no, like, create your policies, create your requirements, share this information with the developers. It's really important to engage the developers, because like I mentioned, they are the ones actually feeling the pain, not you. So this will go a long way if you actually warn them like months sooner or whatever, and create a plan with them and define a deadline. Because like, if you run first only in alerting mode, you actually will get information about that cluster. How healthy is your cluster? And you can see what vulnerabilities we have in our cluster. And after we have this information, share this information with developers and work on a plan to remediate all of these vulnerabilities, and then define a deadline. Then one will switch from alerts to block. Like this, make everything much smoother.
So before I give you the rest of your day to yourself and stop talking at you, Zopa, if I want to get more involved, or if I am looking to make use of the new banking services you've got, do I just head over to the website?
Yeah, website. We are now offering credit cards and fixed term savings, so you can always get information from our Zopa website and get involved. We're also running some TV ads now as well, and some Metro as well. Yeah, so yeah, we'll see a lot of Zopa in the future.
It's exciting stuff. So, and for anybody wanting to get involved, is it the company website got details for any job openings, or is it a special website?
If you go over to our website, you will have the careers section on it, so you can see all of the open positions that we currently have.
Very exciting. Well, listen, thanks again, Andre, for coming along. I really, really appreciate talking to you every time. So thank you again.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre, for taking the time to sit down with me today for this extremely insightful conversation. And thank you for tuning in to today's episode of DevSecTalks. Visit the link below for more details about the DevSecTalks series, and make sure you subscribe and turn on channel notifications to be the first to know about our upcoming episodes. If you're interested in being a part of the DevSecTalks series, or if you have any speakers to recommend, feel free to let us know in the comments section below. See you next time. you.